Hello everybody, Chris Smartage, Brotherhood of Light Show, current YouTube channel. And we're going to continue with our psychedelic rock series show. And this one is going to be about the San Francisco sound. So let's get it on. So this week's show, San Francisco Haight-Ashbury bands reduped 1966 to 1969. One of our viewers pointed out that on my previous San Francisco Haight-Ashbury show, I made some clerical errors about some of the musicians, so I'm going to redo it. Reduped means re-edited, so I'm going to redo the show. And I just want to clarify that a lot of the bands that I'm going to mention are not native San Francisco or California people. They're from different parts of the country, and I don't know the history of every band member. So but they all ended up in San Francisco in Haight-Ashbury around 1966 through 1969, and they became the San Francisco bands, or the San Francisco sound, known for. And so that's the basis of our show this week. So I'm going to start with bands that were out that really weren't part of the Haight scene, but they were the original San Francisco bands, and the Bull Brumos was one of them, with Sal Valentino, and they had a hit called Laugh Laugh, and I remember seeing them on television, and they were kind of like considered the San Francisco Beatles by the press. And then the Grassroots were managed by a friend of mine's father, and they were from LA, and they weren't really one of the San Francisco bands, but they were up in the Bay Area, and they had a hit called Let's Live for Today. So I just want to mention them because some viewers might say, well, what about those guys? Now we're going to get into the kind of underground San Francisco scene. Okay, so here we go. So in the Matrix on Fillmore Street, opened in 1965, and Marty Ballin, guy in the middle of the picture there, Jefferson Airplane picture, opened it with some other guys, and it held about 150 people. You can see everybody lined up to go into the Matrix. And Signia Anderson was the lead singer. There she is. And she got pregnant, and she had to drop out of the music business. But she was on this first album, Jefferson Airplane Takes Off. And so we're going to go to the next chapter of the Jefferson Airplane. So the Matrix was kind of the first club that they had this type of music, this kind of psychedelic folk rock music. And the Great Society with Grace Slick was one of the bands, and you can see a bunch of posters on the left. And so when Anderson dropped out of Jefferson Airplane, Grace Slick joined. They got together and they did this album, Silveristic Pillow, and they had a couple hits off of it. And one of them was called White Rabbit, and it was huge, and it just put the San Francisco bands on the map, the scene. And the Jefferson Airplane had a huge hit, and they became kind of the darlings of San Francisco at that point. So as you can see on the left, the Haight-Ashbury street sign, a friend of my father's brother did the artwork, and that poster kind of inspired me to be a psychedelic artist when I was a kid. So the Jefferson Airplane, there they are playing live at the Fillmore, or I believe the shot's from the Fillmore East. And they were attracted, a lot of these groups were attracted to the Haight-Ashbury. Now Yorma, the guitar player for the Jefferson Airplane, mentions that one of the reasons was the rent was really cheap in San Francisco, and this in this Haight-Ashbury neighborhood, and it was a really cool neighborhood, really artistic, and there was a lot of cool people there. So that's why he moved there. And okay, so then the big deal that summer of '67 was the Monterey Pop Festival, and it ended up breaking a bunch of bands. Jefferson Airplane was one of them, and Big Brother and the Holding Company with Janis Joplin was another band that kind of got signed out of there, and became kind of the next big thing in San Francisco. So let's go to that next. So here we are at Chet Helms' Avalon Ballroom, and there's Chet in between the two graphic posters there. And there is Big Brother and the Holding Company with Janis Joplin playing. There's a psychedelic light show wrapping around the room. And like I said, Big Brother got signed, and they did an incredible version of Ball and Chain at which is an old blues song, at Monterey. And Janis has incredible vocals, and they got signed, and they had this album, Big Brother and Holding Company, which is their first record, and it's got a couple of really good songs on it, but it's basically kind of a demo-ish sounding album. But anyway, that was their first album, and there they are playing at Chet Helms' Avalon Ballroom, and there's a poster of them. So let's go to the next shot, the next band that broke out of Monterey. So here's the next band out of San Francisco, the Grateful Dead, and here's their first two albums, the Golden Road, Grateful Dead album on the left, and then Anthem of the Sun. And Anthem of the Sun is the first side one's kind of a masterpiece, and side two has got a jam called Alligator, and it's kind of a live jam. But the side one is really great. They really found their original sound there. And this picture is them at Ocean Beach with the wall in the background. And there they are at their house, 710. And Rock Scully is sitting on the steps there with Danny Rifkin, the two managers. And to the right, you got Bob Weir, you got Pigpen holding the rifle, Jerry Garcia on the left. You got Bill Kreutzmann, the drummer, holding his arm up, and then you've got Phil Lesh on the right sitting down. So that's the Grateful Dead, and they were kind of like the, mayors of the hate, I guess you could say. That was like Hippie Central, 710, and they were one of the big bands that came out of there, signed by Warner Brothers, I believe. So one of my favorite bands back then was Quicksilver Messenger Service, and John Cipollina, the lead guitar player, the guy in the center of the poster on the right, is from Mill Valley, California, and they played at the Avalon and at the Fillmore West, and there's a Quicksilver Messenger Service Black album, self-titled, with Gold and Silver. It's a take on Take 5, and they did another song called The Fool, which is a very psychedelic, really cool song. And then the Quicksilver Happy Trails album has a lengthy version of Who Do You Love and a great version of Mona. And they were kind of a psychedelic prog rock, guitar-driven band, kind of a proto Allman Brothers sound with the dual guitar players. And one of my favorite bands, they had a couple guys that sang, and they were just really great, and definitely the San Francisco sound. So the next band is Country Joe and the Fish, and they were one of my favorites back then also. And they did this album, Country Joe and the Fish, electric music for your mind and body, and they have a couple good songs on there, Sweet Lorraine and Flying High, and they Also do a much instrumental psychedelic music with this kind of modal guitar sound. And on both these records, this is the pure Country Joe band right here. And one of our viewers was mentioning that they are from Berkeley, California. That's where they were living, supposedly. And originally from LA, but they put the band together in Berkeley. So just want to make sure everybody knows that one. So Country Joe and the Fish. So we're going to take a little trip over the East Bay now, and we're going to mention Sly and the Family Stone. And they were a funk, rock, psychedelic soul band. And their first album is Dance to the Music. Their second album is Life. And then their third album is Stand. These all came out in, before 70. Then they have another one after 70. And there they are, flashy as ever. And I used to hear these ads on the radio, Sly and the Family Stone playing at Frenchie's. So anyway, that's my memory of them. And they ended up becoming really famous. And we were going to get to that at the end of the show here. So here is more examples of the band It's a Beautiful Day. And this album had a hit song called White Bird and Bombay Calling. And this is just a great album. They were just a really good band. They're a violin-driven band. And but kind of prog rock guitar, violin driven, really well orchestrated songs, and just a great band. David LaFlame was their leader. They had a female vocalist doing backup vocals. Just a wonderful band and a great album if you ever get a chance. Now there's the third Grateful Dead Oxa Moxa album with the Rick Griffin album cover. I love the album cover. And there's some great songs on this album, and I think the production was a little soft, but they ended up doing some material for this record on their live album, which I really, really dug. It kind of really turned me on to the Grateful Dead. Then we got the Steve Miller Band, and here's their first two records. And Steve Miller came from Chicago with the Steve Miller Blues Band, and Boss Skaggs was in the band, Boss Skaggs. And the first is Children of the Future, but I really like this album on the right, Sailor. I think it has a variety of music on it. You've got some psychedelic, you got some blues, you got some poppy stuff, you got some great harmonies, and he really did some nice harmonies on his records, and Sailor is really the cool album of the early Steve Miller Band. So after Monterey, things got crazy in the Haight-Ashbury district, and everybody from around the country came out here to check out what it was all about, and the streets just got packed. This animation drawing kind of represents the wildness of the Haight during the 60s, and there's a poster of the classic poster from Bill Graham Presents of Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead, which were kind of the two house bands of the Haight. And then of course Cheap Thrills was the second release by Big Brother and the Holding Company, and it's got this incredible version of Ball and Chain where Janis Joplin, just her high-pitched vocals just are amazing, and a lot of the hard rock singers of the future kind of copied her vocals. She was kind of the first original rock screamer. And there they are on the left. And then on the right, we got Moby Grape. And this picture was taken in Fairfax, California, in front of... Anyway, it was taken in Fairfax, California. Just leave it at that. And so they had a song called Omaha, and they were a really great band. And that was another band that you can consider, Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco band, So as promised, we're going to revisit the Grateful Dead here. And there they are playing in 1968 there was a street fair in Haight-Ashbury, and they pulled up on a flatbed truck, and they unveiled their gear, and they played for an hour and a half to obviously a mobbed street full of locals. And after that, they moved out of San Francisco. They abandoned 710 and moved to Marin County. But they produced this album called Live Dead, and Live Dead was recorded at the Fillmore West and the Avalon Ballroom. So I just want to make sure I got that straight. So it's a great album, and it's got some amazing songs. It's my favorite, personally my favorite Grateful Dead album, or live album especially. So if you've never heard it, check it out. Now they also have a lot of different sounds to their music. They do a country thing, they do blues, they do Americana. So, and they also do the psychedelic and the jammy stuff. So this is pretty much that on this record. So our other group from El Cerrito, California, is Creedence Clearwater Revival, and the Blue album is their first album. It has Susie Q on it, and the second record is called Green River. And as far as I'm concerned, these are my two favorite Creedence Clearwater albums. Once they got into the 70s, they tend to get a little more commercial with their music, and they sold a lot of records, and they had a lot of great records. All of them are good. I just personally like this raw, early version of Creedence Clearwater from El Cerrito, California. So now it's 1969, and the sound of the streets is Carlos Santana's band, Santana, and they released this first album with The Lion, and it's a great album cover. And there's Santana, he's the second guy on the left-hand side looking at the camera, and they have this like soaring lead guitar, Latin flavored guitar, and slashing rhythm section with an incredible drummer and a really good vocalist who plays the Hammond B, and they were just really great. And they this album debuted, and it just hit the charts and did really well. And now the other band from Northern California area is Blue Cheer, with Vincivus Erupsis and Blue Cheer, Outside Inside. And this particular lineup only lasted for 2 albums, but it was super heavy, not necessarily heavy metal, but super heavy, super loud music. They kind of introduced the giant wailing drum sound with the super raspy hard rock vocalist and the 3 stack Marshall amps turned up to 10. And so they are certainly the beginning of heavy hard rock. Blue Cheer from Northern California. And then there's Jefferson Airplane. It's a rendition of their album cover from Volunteers, which is a 1969 release. And at this point, they were living up in 2400 Fulton Street in that mansion there. And, they had a lot of hits, and they were doing well, so they were able to afford to live in a mansion. I don't know if the whole band lived up there, but it's known as the Jefferson Airplane House, and it's kind of a landmark, and there's the address right there. So just want to make sure we got that one right. So August 1969, 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th, the Woodstock Music Festival happens back east, and 350,000 people show up and kind of launch the San Francisco or the psychedelic sound into mainstream rock or music or the world. So the Grateful Dead played there, Santana, Creedence, Clearwater, Jefferson Airplane. So all these bands we've been talking about, or some of them, all ended up playing at Woodstock, and it kind of launched their careers. And it was kind of like Madison Avenue moved in and took over the music business, and the Woodstock live album was a big hit, and the band started producing live albums. And here is the Grateful Dead's catalog. They continued to play for the next 30 years, essentially, and they had a little break for a while when they broke up in the mid-70s, but they all continued to play and did solo records. And but here's their catalog, and there's a bunch of live albums in here, and they kind of continued with that San Francisco sound, the psychedelic vibe in their music, and they eventually they pretty much sold out wherever they played, and they ended up in the 90s playing football stadiums, baseball stadiums, and then Jerry Garcia passed away in 1995, and but the Grateful Dead, different versions, Dead and Company or the other ones, or just Dead, have continued on with other members to replace Garcia and other members, keyboard players, and they still draw really huge and can still sell out amphitheaters and even football stadiums to this day. So it's pretty amazing that they're kind of the one longevity group that's really lasted. But the Woodstock Festival changed everything and basically turned our San Francisco sound, and this is what I think, into commercial rock or classic rock. So here's the good old Grateful Dead, one of the original San Francisco Haight-Ashbury bands, and the San Francisco sound, along with the other bands I mentioned on this show. And I just kind of went for the commercial ones that were around, that seemed to be the headliners at the Fillmore, and that happened during those 3 years, 66, 67, 68, 69, well, actually 4 years. And this is a promo shot of Grateful Dead up in Daly City, and the neighbors thought they were shooting some kind of like science fiction movie or something out there. But anyway, I mixed some psychedelic light show stuff in there. I projected this on the screen at in the Wiltern Theater down in LA. We were doing a show down there, and this actual picture of my light show screen. But I thought it was apropos for San Francisco sound. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this show. Hopefully I got everything right this time on my redupe, my re-edit, my reshoot. So thanks for everybody, letting me know how to tell the proper story here. I want to get my facts straight. So thank you very much. And you guys check out the rest of my channel. I do this stuff for fun. I love building slideshows. That's what I've done with the light shows all my life. And I just really enjoy doing it. I want to keep in my mind in the music business, and I want to turn people on to this cool music of the 60s and early 70s. So keep checking out my shows, and we'll see you next time. Signing off.